Hey, what's going on? Luke here. For today's video, we're going to be talking about the sacking of John Morris by the Cronulla-Sutherland Sharks, what this means for their 2021 season, and also what it means for them going forward. Now, for me personally, I just want to say I think that the Sharks have absolutely screwed up completely. You can tell by the title of this video. And look, I was doing a video yesterday where I was talking about my tips for the week, and I started to talk about the Sharks, and I still can't figure out the whole John Morris situation. I don't understand what he's done. I don't understand why he's in the situation he's in. Look, there's been plenty of shit coaches in the NRL, and John Morris doesn't seem to be it. At least he's not performing like it anyways. You look at plenty of the clubs at the moment in the NRL, there's been the talk of how big of a mismatch there is between clubs, between the shit clubs and the good clubs. And the Sharks, for the roster that they've got, they're actually doing quite well. I feel like they should be a lot further down than what they are. Their roster is an aging roster and also an injury-prone roster, and yet they've been able to make the 8 every year that John Morris has been there. Been able to make the 8 for most of the years since they won the grand final. But look, you look at John Morris, obviously they don't see a future for him, and I don't have any problems with them sacking him in terms of getting rid of him in the future, but just the situation and just the current circumstances, I don't really understand it, because it's not like they've been playing terribly. It's 5 rounds into the season. If you listed all the coaches in the NRL and said who's going to be the first one to get the sack in 2021, definitely would have been John Morris, and yet he was the one who was being talked about right from round one. I don't really understand why he was under so much pressure, and it has to be something where he had disagreement with the board members or something, because all the players have been coming out and saying how much they back him and how he's been dudded essentially. Sean Johnson has been very, very vocal about it the last couple of weeks, doing over various podcasts. I think there was a couple of them he's come out and talked about it, and he said in all of them that John Morris has done a good job, and he doesn't understand why it's happening. And also, for players wanting to sign with the Sharks, you don't want to sign with the Sharks because you don't know who the coach is going to be. Now, I feel like that's actually a factor into why they've gone and signed Fitzgibbon. I think that they want a Fitzgibbon for next year, but they need to make the decision now. And obviously, John Morris wasn't the man, and they need to sign him because they had so many players off contract. So they need to fill a lot of roster spots. And I think Sean Johnson said it best when he said that players don't want to sign for a club if they don't know who the coach is going to be. So they need to make a decision in that sense where, if they didn't want John Morris next year, they need to get rid of him now, or at least they needed to tell him that he's not wanted for next year and announce who the coach is going to be. Just the reason behind it though is just strange because of, like I said, the results aren't that bad. The results aren't bad at all, really. I mean, I think their win percentage under him was 47%. You look at the side they inherited. He inherited a very aging squad. In the first season, he ended up having Paul Gallen and Luke Lewis retire, 2 guys who had been around the club for a long, long time, who had sort of had the club built around them and were the leaders of the club, literal captain of the club in Paul Gallen. And Luke Lewis was a fantastic player, even right up until his retirement. So you've got 2 holes there in your side, and you've got to try and replace him with the salary cap situation that he was left in terms of Shane Flanagan. Even just the Flanagan fiasco in itself was a shit show for the Sharks, and John Morris had to come in and try and clean it up. But you add in that, he had a significant decrease in the salary cap, so it's not like he could go out and sign a whole bunch of players. Look, he had some decent players to work with. Let's not pretend that he didn't actually have a decent side, because he's got some pretty decent players. I mean, he had Josh Dugan still there, injury prone, but he's there. Sean Johnson, Matt Moylan, like I'm saying, they're great players. They are injury prone, but still great players there. You had Chad Townsend's won a premiership. Will Kennedy's been good for him. The first season, he had Josh Morris. He had Bronson Xerri. Obviously, both of them ended up going as well. The whole Bronson Xerri situation was just a complete shambles for the Sharks. Nothing that they really did wrong. It's just literally his own doing. However, they had just let go of Josh Morris, and then Xerri ended up getting popped for the steroids or whatever it was, like a couple of weeks later. So didn't end up working out well for them in that regards. But look, the rest of the side, it is a half-decent side. Toby Rudolph's been good for him. They still had Andrew Fafita. The Brayley situation with Jaden left, and then you had Blake coming in. They still had a pretty solid side. But I don't know if the board is a little bit delusional in the sense that they think that this side should be a top 4 side rather than a top 8 side. Because that's what I'm sort of getting out of it. Because the Sharks have been making the top 8, and it seems to me they've looked at John Morris and said, yeah, well, you're not going to win a premiership with this lot. And to that I say, well, obviously they're not going to win a premiership with this crew. Look at the squad. It's not a premiership caliber team. Compare them to the Roosters, the Storm, Penrith, all those sort of sides, and it's nowhere near it. But it's also a side that's got to be able to make the 8 and sort of give them a little bit of trouble. We saw them take on the Roosters last week, and even though the Roosters are a bit depleted in the sense that their halves are down, they still had the literal prodigies in Sam Walker playing, and he came on. It took him literally going gangbusters for them to win the game, despite them having Tedesco and the Morris boys and all that. The Sharks are in that game, and the Sharks, for the majority of the games, are in those games right until the end, right until the death. And the more I talk about it, I don't know if this is sort of justifying the sacking of John Morris or it's going the other way. I don't really know where I'm going with this one, because the more I talk about it, the more I think, oh well, they actually are in a pretty good spot. They got a lot of players off contract. Maybe this is the right time for them to get a new coach in, just do a complete rebuild, because they're sort of a side who's not terrible, they're not good, but they're not terrible. They're sort of in the middle there, and they're just sort of plodding along, just making up numbers in the 8. So maybe the more I'm talking, the more I'm starting to think maybe they're not as screwed as what I think. But look, I've titled this video that Sharks are screwed in 2021, and that's exactly what they are. In 2021, they are not going to do anything. I wouldn't be surprised if they just start going downhill, because the players are going to be looking at the whole coaching situation, and they're going to be going, oh, what's the point? What's the point? Most of the players are off contract, so I suppose they're going to be looking at them to try and play at the best of their ability to secure a contract elsewhere or get re-signed. But yeah, like, just, I don't know, just this whole situation, it hasn't sat well with me, and I feel like it hasn't sat well with a lot of the fans out there, because it feels like everything's sort of been hush-hush. Like, it's all been coming out that John Morris is under pressure, but there's been no sort of reason for it. It's just been, yeah, he's under pressure, they're looking to sack him and bring in Fitzgibbon, but there was no, like, oh, well, John Morris is, he's had a falling out with the players, or John Morris had a falling out with the board, or the results aren't great for him, because none of it's come out, and none of it's made sense. So yeah, that's the hardest part with this whole situation. But in terms of them signing Craig Fitzgibbon, I think it's a fairly decent one. However, I find it strange that they would get rid of John Morris and then bring in an unproven coach. And I know a lot of people are going to sit there and say, well, he's had great success with the Roosters, why would you not bring him over? But to that I say, like, there's been so many coaches who have been great assistants, and it's easy to be an assistant at a team like the Roosters, where they'll chuck whoever in next year, and they'll be as good next year, and they'll be the assistant coach. And I don't think their results are a reflection on who the assistant coach is. I think they've gone through quite a lot of coaches, actually, and yet every year the Roosters still end up in the same spot. It's kind of like the Storm. The Storm seem to have a lot of assistant coaches. Look at you, Stephen Kearney's and such, and then they end up going to other clubs, and then they don't really do too well, and they end up back at the Storm system. I think Jason Taylor was another one who went through the Roosters. Just because you're a good assistant doesn't mean you're a good NRL coach, and I don't know if that's going to bite the Sharks in the arse or not. No pun intended, but yeah, it just seems like something that I don't know if you'd want to risk that, especially with the NRL first grade, with a team like the Sharks. They should be competing for the top 4. They should be going upwards. They're not only going downwards. And I think there is a great possibility that they end up going downwards, because it's, like I said, so many players who are off contract at the moment. You got an unproven coach, literally a guy who's never coached a first grade game in his life. So he hasn't really got anything to attract players, apart from him being a great player back in the day. We all know Craig Fitzgibbon was absolutely amazing back in the day. Good goal kicker, good forward. He's just a good leader too, great captain for the Roosters. But if you're a player from an opposition club and you're looking to sign with the Sharks, what's your incentive other than money? Because at this point, like I just said, they've got an unproven coach. The rest of the squad's up in the air. I don't really know what's going to be happening with the Sharks, so why would you sign with them? And I think that's the scary thing for the Sharks and for the Sharks fans. However, we just don't really know what's going to happen in the future, and I think that's the beautiful thing about the NRL, is that you look at a side like this and you don't understand why it's happening, but this could be a masterstroke. It really could be, or it could be an absolute failure. We don't really know, but we're just going to have to wait and see how this whole situation plays out. I think I said situation literally like 50 times this video, but I think it's time for me to end this video. I'm kind of just rambling at this point, but leave in the comment section below, what are your thoughts of John Morris as a coach? Do you think he was dudded? Do you back the Sharks in the sacking of him? Do you think the signing of Fitzgibbon's a good one? Do you think it's a bad one? Just let me know in the comment section below. Also, while you're at it, if you did happen to enjoy this video, make sure you go ahead and smash the like button and subscribe to the channel if you're new around here. Also, turn on the notification bell. It's super important in terms of you actually seeing the video, because sub boxes, they're quite dodgy, so go ahead, use the notification bell, get a little notification on your phone, click on the video, leave a like, leave a first comment or something. So go ahead and do that. Also, while you're at it, go ahead and give me a follow on social media. It's on the screen right now. It's Mr. Luke and YT for the most part. My Facebook is just Mr. Luke, but everything else is Mr. Luke and YT, including Snapchat. So it's on the screen right now. Go ahead and give me a follow, give me an ad, do all that sort of stuff. And that's where I'm going to end this video. Stay tuned for more content on the channel, and I'll see you next time. See yous.